If you are pregnant or you've recently had a baby, this podcast is for you. I am your host, Kath Bequee, a physiotherapist working in women's health and mum of 3. Join me each week as we dive into all things pregnancy care, childbirth and postnatal recovery, helping you have a wonderful pregnancy and afterbirth experience. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Welcome to episode 45 of the Fitness Mama podcast. I am your host, Kath Bequee. I am a mum of 3 young girls, a physiotherapist for women, and I have an online community, Fitness Mama, which helps to provide pregnant and new mothers with the exercises, support, and resources they need to feel good from the inside out as they prepare for and recover from pregnancy, childbirth, and afterbirth recovery. Fitness Mama has workouts that are tired mum friendly, achy mama friendly, and toddler friendly that you can do in the convenience of your home at the end of a long day whilst your bubba sleeps or whilst your toddler is running around causing havoc. I'm excited to be chatting to a lovely mother, Jessica, who gave birth to Aurora just 4 weeks ago. Jessica describes a really positive, beautiful home birth story, and she also tells us about a trip to the hospital afterwards. So no matter what sort of birth you end up having, home, hospital, induced, whatever it is, Jessica, I really do believe, gives some great insights into how understanding the hormones and the physiology of birth, like how that really helped her to feel calm and empowered throughout the whole process. So stick around because it is really a lovely birth story that you won't want to miss. But before I do dive right in, I do just want to let you know about a 7-day free trial to Fitness Mama. In this 7-day free trial, you can trial one of our Pilates classes. You can do as many on-demand classes as you'd like. You can binge listen to guest expert speakers discussing topics focused on pregnancy, childbirth, and recovery, including hypnobirthing, induction, breastfeeding, sex after childbirth, nutrition after having a baby, and so much more. There are also heaps of Q&A sessions with myself on topics including abdominal muscle separation, pregnancy-related pelvic pain, cesarean scar massage, mastitis, and more. All you need to do is head to fitnessmama.com/free. Right, let's get into today's episode. Hello, Jessica. Thank you for joining me today.
Yes. Hi, Kath. Thank you for having me.
It is so lovely to be able to have a chat to a mum who's just given birth. I think it's something that's very special about hearing different women's experiences, ups and downs, challenges, the amazing things that happen. So thank you so much. But those I'm sure there's few people that don't know who you are. Could you just briefly introduce yourself? Let us know a little bit about your motherhood journey.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Jessica and I live in Melbourne, Australia. I moved here about 2 years ago in 2019 from the US, hence my American accent. And I started my motherhood journey pretty later in life because I had a pretty demanding job back in the States. So I didn't have a lot of time or space to think about having kids. And then when I moved to Australia, something switched in me and my biological clock was like, okay, it's time to start thinking about it now. And then with the pandemic and everything, I just got really serious about it. Me and my husband have been together for a long time. So we've been together for 15 years and decided that it was time to start a family. So yeah, we tried and it happened right away. So we're very fortunate and we have a beautiful baby girl now. So.
Oh, amazing. So is your husband Australian or American?
He is American as well. So we're both from the US and we're out here on our own, which has been a little bit of a challenge, but because we've been together for so long, we know each other really well. And he's been an amazing support partner through the birth and even afterwards. So it's been great.
That's amazing. Can I ask why did you come to Australia?
So he got a job offer and he was looking for a job at the time. So he was laid off, and the timing just worked out really well for us. And we wanted to take this opportunity to see the world and go to a new place. And we heard good things about Melbourne, Australia. So we were like, oh, we'll just go and see how it is. And we really like it so far. So.
And you haven't, obviously, you came and you sort of got stuck here with COVID, is that right?
Yes. So all of our family is still back in the States, which is really hard being away from them. But we, at the same time, we feel really grateful to be here because it's a very safe place to be in the middle of the pandemic. So, yeah.
So how did you find that navigating like a new country and a new healthcare system in that journey to becoming pregnant and having a baby?
Yeah, that was a challenge. I went online, I did a lot of Facebook research in different pregnancy groups, and I also talked to some doulas and midwives here in Australia to get an idea of what the options were as far as childbirth and the healthcare system, because I didn't have Medicare at the time. So we had private insurance, and I wanted to know what would be better to do like private hospital, public hospital, home birth. I wanted to explore all my options. And I also didn't have an established relationship with an OB or anything yet. So I had to really do a lot of research on that side and talk to people and get their opinions. And it took a while to figure it out. I actually switched providers like halfway through my pregnancy. So I had like one private OB and then I switched to a different one. And then I ended up going with midwives and did a home birth. So yeah, it was a journey.
Yeah, so talk me through that journey. What made you, first of all, switch OBs or obstetricians, and then what made you go to midwife? And like, were you initially planning on having a hospital birth and then that changed? Like, yeah, talk us through it.
Yeah, I was really open-minded in the beginning. And then the more research I did, the more I realized that if I'm healthy and low risk, that it would be better for me to have a home birth. Personally, that was what my intuition was telling me. And I was really afraid of being in a hospital in the middle of lockdown and also being pressured to like have the time constraints and any other medical intervention that might not be necessary for me. So that's really why I leaned toward home birth. And I wanted to be in my own space and have the comfort of my own home. And I like the idea of having midwives because they're women and they were very supportive and caring. And you just get more of that emotional support from them. Whereas at a private obstetrician, it's all business most of the time. And I just didn't feel like that connection. And really, obstetricians are there if anything goes wrong. So I wanted someone there that could help me throughout the whole process emotionally and physically and mentally, especially because I didn't have any family here to support me. So I had to go the extra mile to get that support for myself.
Yeah, 100%. And like, we haven't talked about this, like you're a member in Fitness Mama, and I do remember when you first announced you'd had a baby, and I knew you'd been planning a home birth, but we haven't really had a big chat. So it's great to talk to you about it. So that transition you went through, I'm just reflecting on the fact that that is massive, considering you're alone well, not alone, but you're in Australia with your husband with no family supports. And you went through a massive transition in terms of hospitals into home birth. So what helped to give you that confidence to have a home birth?
Well, a few things. So I actually stayed with a backup obstetrician because I wanted to have that in case there were any complications, because it's my first baby and I didn't know what was going to happen. So that gave me some comfort level as far as if anything went wrong. And then just meeting the midwives and talking to them, I felt so comfortable and it just felt like the right decision. I just knew immediately that that's what I wanted. And I had such a good experience with them that I didn't worry. And any worries that I had, we talked about in depth. So we would have like an hour-long conversation about what if this happened or what if that happened. So it really put my mind at ease. And then I read a lot of books as well. So I learned about the physiological stages of labor and childbirth. And I did a lot of meditations and hypnobirthing as well. And that helped ease my fears and worries, and affirmations too. Those were really great because I would listen to those every night when I was pregnant, and it all just kind of got embedded into my subconscious, so that when I was in birth, I knew like, this is normal. This pain is healthy pain and it's productive pain. And I would just repeat that stuff to myself. And all of that got me through it and got me to feel confident and comfortable with my body and what it was capable of.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think there's a lot of power in having that pre-knowledge and that education about the different stages of labor and about the different hormones that kick in, and understanding, as you said, the physiology of birth, I think can help, whether or not you have a home birth or a hospital or whatever it is, can really help with so many different areas. So that's great. You took that all on board beforehand. This episode is brought to you by Baby Bee, Australian-owned and designed prams combining quality, safety and style. Not only does Baby Bee let you try their prams at home with free returns for 9 months, yes, that's 9 months, they also offer an industry-leading 3-year warranty for total peace of mind. With thousands of 5-star reviews, around-the-clock customer care, and up to $300 of free accessories with every pram, what are you waiting for? Go visit www.babybeeonline.com and check them out for yourself. And yes, for listeners of the podcast, there is a 20% discount code. Enter FITBEE, FITBEE 20 at checkout, and T's and C's apply.
Yeah, and your modules were amazing as well. So the childbirth module in particular, about the 4 stages of birth and what to expect, or the 3 stages, and the pain coping techniques. So I watched that a couple times just to reiterate what I had learned and what to expect. And then all of your workouts too, when we did the Kegel exercises and pelvic floor exercises, those were really helpful. Breathing and distraction techniques. I used all of that when I was giving birth.
Oh, that's great to hear. So for those that are listening, Jessica's referring to inside Fitness Mama, there's a pregnancy module and there's a childbirth module, and she's talking you through a few sessions inside that module. And then the Kegels, otherwise known as pelvic floor exercises, that are sort of embedded throughout all the workouts, during the workout and at the end. Going back to your birth, so thank you for that, Jessica. You didn't need to say all that. But going back to your birth, talk me through, like, when you first went into labour, like what did you feel? How was that realisation?
Yes. So the last part of your 3rd trimester, every day, you're like, it could happen at any time now. And it's that uncertainty. You just have to be okay with it. And
what do they say? Pregnancy's 9 months, except for the last month, which is a year long or something.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, when is it going to happen? And it was a first time mom. They're like, oh, expect the baby to come a week late. So I was not 100% ready by the time I started going into labor, because I was early, just a few days early, and it was a full moon. So I thought maybe that would kickstart things, which it did. And I did an exercise class that day as well. So my body was getting ready and I could feel Braxton Hicks all day. And then I woke up at like 11:45 at night with some cramping, went to the toilet. I lost my mucus plug, and immediately from there, it was like 5 minutes apart, my contractions started. So I didn't have a whole lot of early labor. It was very intense from the beginning. I ended up putting on a TENS machine at like 4 a.m. because it got to be almost unbearable. And I wanted to get ahead of the pain. So the TENS machine was amazing. I actually had that on for probably 20 hours until the batteries went out, and I would just keep increasing the boost button. So every time you have a contraction, you just click the button and it triggers the pulse, the electrical pulse. And that was a great distraction, as well as breathing through those. And because it was so late at night, I hadn't really gotten any sleep. So I had 2 hours of sleep, and then I was starting labor immediately. So I was trying to nap in between contractions as much as possible, but that was hard.
So you went into labour at 11:45, and then you put the TENS on at 3 in the morning, and it was 4 in the morning, and it was already pretty intense. And then for the next 20 hours.
Yeah. So my labor was actually 40 hours total. Yeah, it was a very, very long labor. And the reason is because the baby was posterior, which I was afraid of, like towards the end of my pregnancy, because the baby kept moving side to side in my belly. And I thought, I bet you anything this baby is going to be born posterior. I just had a feeling. And I was doing all of the spinning baby stuff and going on all fours, everything that they tell you to do. And it's just the way that she wanted to come out. And I'm just so lucky that I had such patient midwives to wait for me and wait for the baby to come out the way that she wanted to.
So because you had private midwives, was she there for the whole time?
No, so they pretty much wait until you're in active labor to come over, but we were in constant communication with them over text message. And I had a student midwife as well. So there was 2 private midwives and then a student midwife at the birth. And the student midwife came over earlier just to check in on me. And she was like, yeah, it's probably time to call them in. But to be honest, the whole timeline is a little bit of a blur to me because I was in labor land and I didn't look at my phone. I wasn't trying to keep track of time or day or anything. I was just literally focusing on one surge at a time. So when she came over and recommended they come over, I think they came at like 9:00 at night on Friday night. So 20 hours after I had started labor. And then, so I ended up giving birth on Saturday at 3:18 p.m. But I was planning on doing a water birth. So I had a pool ready to go. And the pool took a little bit of time to fill up. So FYI, if anyone does a pool, make sure you fill it up in advance. It took about an hour and we ran out of hot water too. So we had to use boiling water towards the end to keep filling it. And by the time the midwives were like, okay, you can get into the pool now. They didn't want my contractions to slow down. So they wouldn't let me in the pool for a while. So by the time I got into the pool, I'm pretty sure I was going through transition. And I thought that it was going to be a lot more pain relief than it was. And I just got through it. And by the time I was ready to push, I actually didn't want to be in the pool anymore. So I got into the shower, and that was actually way better than the pool for me because I could feel the water on my back and I could lean over and I could stand up, which was a lot more comfortable. And I used also a pull-up bar to bear down, and had a scarf attached to that. And I was using that during the pushing phase, and that helped a lot.
So where was the pull-up bar? I'm just trying to picture it.
Yeah, so I have a pull-up bar just hanging over a door frame right next to where the pool was. So everything was all set up in advance because I knew that I might want to use it. And when I gave birth, I was actually leaning over an exercise ball, which is what I did a lot during pregnancy. And my husband was sitting in front of me and I was holding his hands and he was sitting down as well. And then I was on my knees. And that was the most comfortable way for me to give birth. And I actually really enjoyed pushing a lot more than the contractions. I thought the contractions were a lot more painful than the pushing stage. I was pushing as hard as I physically could, which I was very surprised about. And the midwife was just amazing, telling me, when to do a big push, little push. And I did not tear at all, which is incredible considering the baby came up face up. It was all in all a very positive experience. And I'm just so grateful for the way everything turned out.
Yeah, it's so lovely to hear you did have such a positive experience, and that's amazing. Can I delve into a few of those things that you talked about? So Correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like during that first stage of labor, were you really trying to stay in your zone?
Yes, 100%. I really didn't talk to anybody. I had this whole idea of what I was going to do in early labor. Like I was going to have a project to do, or I was going to be listening to hypnobirthing tracks on repeat. And I didn't even want to look at my phone. I didn't want to have anything in front of me. I was just so deep within myself and closed my eyes most of the time. I was breathing, just trying to relax and kind of replaying affirmations in my head that, this is normal. Everything is happening the way it's supposed to happen. My baby will come when my baby is ready, all of those things. And I just lost track of time and went within myself.
And was this something that just naturally came to you, or did you think, okay, I'm not going to look at my phone? Like, how did this happen?
Yeah, well, I knew because of all of the classes that I took and everything, to keep the oxytocin going and the endorphins going, you had to think positively and breathe through the surges. And also, whenever I would feel the adrenaline coming, I would just tell myself oxytocin, oxytocin, oxytocin. So that came kind of subconsciously, but also naturally. I didn't have to tell myself to do anything. And I just wanted to kind of be by myself and experience it within myself, as opposed to having other people help me.
That's amazing, because what you're describing, for those that are listening, is there's different hormones of labour. And refer back to a session I did with Loretta, who's from Calm Birth Australia. I'll have to link it in the show notes, but she really describes these hormones well. So we've got the oxytocin, which is the love hormone, and this is really important for helping to work on the sympathetic system and help to create the calmness and bonding with the newborn. And then we have beta endorphins, which subdues that part of the brain that is thinking. So I think what you're describing there is those beta endorphins were really kicking in and you were going into your special place. And I think this is where sometimes, like if you are having a birth in a hospital, this is where altering that environment as much as possible can help with those natural hormones. So by turning those lights down in the hospital, trying not to talk to people, having nice calming music can help to keep you in that zone, which is obvious. Like this is what you're talking about, I think, is where those beautiful cocktail of hormones were kicking in so that you could zone out and just go with the flow. Moving on, you talked about when you felt it was go-to time and the pushing phase began. Could you describe that in a bit more detail? Like, how did you know it was time to push out the baby?
My body told me, so I knew when it was time to start pushing when I felt this urge to bear down. And that was after the most intense part of the labor and the contractions, which they call transition. And I wanted to stand up at that point because it was more comfortable, and squatting. So squatting helped with pushing. And I felt the sensation in different areas of my body. So you feel it more towards your back and your bum when you want to push. It kind of feels like you have to take a poo, which is what other women will tell you. And then you feel less in your cervix. So it's more towards your back and then coming down through the birth canal. So that's how I knew it was time to push. And my body just did it for me the majority of the time. And then I would push as hard as I could when I felt those sensations to bear down.
So you mentioned you trialed a few different positions. And I think that's really nice to note, because it is possible, depending if you're hooked up to, different equipment and monitoring and epidural. But let's say you are free to move. It is possible to trial one position, and then if that's not comfortable, trial another position. Can you talk us through some of the different positions you tried?
Yes, absolutely. So the one that I started with was standing and then leaning over a chair in the shower. I had a tall, high chair in there with me, and I leaned over with my hands on the top of the chair, and I was able to squat a little bit and just lean over and then have the shower on my back. That was one position. Also, sitting on the toilet backwards. My midwife called the toilet the dilation station. And that was comfortable for a little bit. And then I stood up and also leaned over the toilet backwards because it's a little bit higher in the back.
So out of interest, why sitting on a toilet backwards and not sitting on a chair backwards?
Well, you probably could sit on a chair backwards. It was just convenient because the toilet was there.
And you're actually pushing. So
yeah,
you need that gap. Yeah.
Yeah. And your brain, when you're on the toilet, is already thinking about pushing. So it puts your mind in that mindset when you're sitting on the toilet. And I also sat on the toilet just a regular way. And that's when the baby's head really came down. And I was able to feel her head as it was coming down. I was the first person to touch her head. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, wow. How did you know the baby's head was crowning?
The midwife told me. And I could feel her. I could feel her coming. And it was pretty intense. So your hips really open up and your whole pelvis opens and you can feel the baby coming down through your body.
Yeah, it's just brilliant. And it seems like you just got such a vivid experience about it all.
Yeah, so when you get to that pushing phase, that's when the adrenaline kicks in again. So you're a little bit more aware of what's going on. And I was surprised that I still had some relief between contractions at that point. So it wasn't like a constant pain. There was points where I could breathe and relax in between pushing, and it wasn't unbearable. I actually enjoyed pushing a lot more than the previous part of labor where you just have contractions and it doesn't feel like anything's happening yet.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like what you're describing from personal experience, I did not experience that in my first and second labor. Like I just remember being in such a different headspace. I can hardly recall that at all. Whereas for my third, it was such a more pleasant experience. And I do remember being more acutely aware of, being able to relax in between the pushes, and which I certainly didn't feel for the first and second. So that's brilliant that you felt that. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, the thing that helped also was the vocalization. So moaning, like low moaning noises, and deep breathing when it came time to push.
Can you explain that a bit more?
Yeah, so instead of having a high-pitched screaming, you want to keep your voice nice and low because that helps release the pain, and breathe with your body. So I was able to breathe out when the contractions were coming down, and then my body would actually push even further. So it almost like knocked the wind out of me, and I could feel my body just pushing the baby out as I was breathing.
Amazing. And I think what you're describing there is similar to a mooing. It's more diaphragmatic. It gets done lower in your abdomen versus like a scream or the panting, which is up in your upper chest. So it doesn't help with that. Yeah, that's really interesting that you're describing that, because that's what I teach my mums in, like we've got a preparing for labour 5-day event and inside the membership. So talking all about the deep breathing during that pushing phase. And that not only helps with that pushing, but I really do feel that helps with that pelvic floor relaxation too. Were you aware of the crowning of the head?
Yes, and I was prepared because I knew that the Ring of Fire, I heard about that. And I did some perineal massage, which helped prepare me mentally for that. And the midwife was amazing because she had a hot compress there and oil. And so that really helped with opening the area and taking the time to come out. So I did not tear. And that's also when the midwife would tell me when to do a bigger push and then a smaller push. So I did have to pant a little bit when she told me to slow down. And I trusted her completely. And it was amazing because I actually didn't feel that much pain as the head was coming out.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, once the head came out, it was just a minute of rest and then one more big push, and then her whole body slid out. And it was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And how did you learn how to do perineal massage?
I took a class with some midwives and they briefly went over how to do it. And there was a diagram in a book that they gave us. And also your module where you talked about the stretching of your lips and the sensation and what that would feel like. That was probably the most helpful in preparing me to do that.
Brilliant. So moving on, like that's just everything you said is so amazing. What happened once your baby was born? Can you talk us through the next few hours? And
yeah, once the baby was born, she was perfectly healthy and cooing, and she cried a little bit, and then she just latched on right away, and we had a beautiful bonding time with my husband, and my dog was there. It was incredible. And then when it came time for third stage, which was delivery of the placenta, there was some complications. So it was about an hour after the birth. I got back on the toilet to to see if we could deliver the placenta, and it just wasn't happening. So long story short, I did have to transfer to hospital to get the placenta removed. And it's a very rare complication that happened to me. It's called retained placenta. Luckily, I did have an obstetrician as backup, and he was wonderful. He waited for me at the hospital and was there when I arrived in the ambulance. The ambulance ride was very calm as well. The paramedics were very cooperative. I was able to hold my baby skin to skin the whole time. The midwife was there with me, being supportive. And then when I got to the hospital, I had to go to theater, and my placenta was removed manually. I was put under general anesthesia, and I was in the hospital for a couple of days after that. So after talking with my doctor about what happened, he said there was really nothing that we could have done to prevent it or know that it was going to happen. And it's only a 1 in 500 chance. So that being said, I'm still really happy that I had a home birth. And I think it was the best decision for me and my family and the baby, because the baby was perfectly healthy and happy. It was just that last part that I'm very grateful that we have such good hospitals here and a medical team that was ready for me, and I'm on the mend now.
yeah, brilliant. And was that a bit of a shock to you? Like, were you upset having to be in hospital?
Initially, yes, it was a little disappointing because I had spent 40 hours in labor and had this beautiful home birth, and I didn't want to go to hospital. I really wanted to just stay home with my family and enjoy our time together. But the silver lining of going to hospital was they took really good care of us. We had our own room, and they brought all our meals, so we didn't have to worry about cooking or cleaning. And I was really able to rest and have the midwives check in on us and make sure everything was going well. Because of the blood loss that I had, it was really hard for me to walk and stand up and do things. So being in the hospital was really helpful for those first couple of days.
Yeah, great. And did you get breastfeeding support in the hospital?
Yes. The midwives were great there. They watched me feed her. And I also brought some colostrum that I had collected. My husband grabbed those from the freezer, and we were able to use that a little bit in the beginning to get us going. And yeah, breastfeeding went really well from the beginning.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And so you were obviously feeling a bit, like, has it taken a few weeks for your strength and energy to return after the blood loss?
Yes. So one of the nurses told me it would take about 6 weeks, which seems about right because I'm 5 weeks out now. And my energy is almost back to normal. The first couple of weeks were the hardest. I pretty much stayed in my room and had people helping me go up and down the stairs. But other than that, yeah, the recovery's been good, other than the fatigue and the lightheadedness from that.
And how did your perineal area, like the pelvic floor area, feel?
It definitely felt stretched out right after the birth, which is normal. And it was, at first I was like, oh my gosh, what did I do to myself? And I think that a lot of women feel that way. So
yes, I think it doesn't matter what sort of birth you have, afterwards you think, oh my gosh, what's happened to my body?
yeah. And after a couple of days, I could feel the sensations again. So I just started doing the pelvic floor exercises very, very carefully, and not holding for a long time, but just the quick holds. And I do that every day. Every time I nurse the baby, I remind myself to do it.
Oh, good. Well done. That's perfect. And I do remember it was a bit of a shock personally when you're pregnant and you can do nice strong lifts and holds. And then once you have your baby, I remember those first few days, I was lucky to be able to lift up for a second and then relax. And it is a bit of a shock to the system. So it's nice to be prepared that, yes, you will be weak. You won't be able to hold for long, but it does improve. It does keep getting better. And it's amazing. The pelvic floor muscles get stretched up to 300% during childbirth, which is 3 times its length. It's amazing. No other muscle in the body does it. So having that period of rest and recovery, I think, is so important for your long-term strength as well. Cool. So well done, Jessica. Like, just such an incredible story. And I know you had a home birth and it was a beautiful experience for you, but I feel like you've given so many like little nuggets of wisdom to all women, whether or not they have a hospital birth or even get induced. Like, I do think, you've been able to provide some lovely information and been lovely. So thank you. To finish off, if you could just have, a few more words of wisdom to pregnant women listening, what are your parting words to that lovely pregnant woman listening?
I think the best advice would be to follow your intuition. That's something that I did towards the middle and end of my pregnancy, and it really gave me the birth that I wanted personally and put me in the right headspace. So if you listen to your intuition and what you want, everything will work out for you. And also choosing the right care provider. So your care provider will a lot of times determine what kind of birth you have. So it's important to ask the right questions and make sure that you're setting yourself up for the environment that you want for your birth.
Yeah, which will be different for everyone. And it sounds like you did so much of that prior research and you put a lot of energy into deciding that, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jessica. It's been an absolute delight to chat today, and we will see you soon.
Thank you, Kath.
And before I sign off, remember my team and I will be putting together the show notes for this episode with all the links at fitnessmama.com/podcast. Have a fabulous day, everyone, and I look forward to you joining me next week for another episode of the Fitness Mama podcast. Thanks for listening to the Fitness Mama podcast, brought to you by the Fitness Mama freebies found at www.fitnessmama.com/free. So please take a few seconds to leave a review, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and be sure to take a screenshot of this podcast, upload it to your social media, and tag me at Fitness Mama so I can give you a shout out too. Until next time, remember, an active pregnancy, confident childbirth, and strong postnatal recovery is something that you deserve. Remember our disclaimer: materials and contents in this podcast are intended as general information only and shouldn't substitute any medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. I'll see you soon.